Welcome, everyone. I'm Peter Freer, the founder and CEO of Play Attention. Thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it. My background is actually education. I started Play Attention well over 35 years ago as a classroom teacher. I hold a master's in education with specialty areas in physics, science, math, and computer programming. And when I was teaching both students and adults, I found they had attention problems. So naively, I thought, well, I'll create a program that'll fix them. So working 3 jobs, 6 days a week over the course of 7 or 8 years, I finally came up with Play Attention, and we founded the company in 1994. Now it's evolved a lot since then, and we're sponsoring this webinar on ADHD and lying. So we are truly appreciative that you're here. This is quite an interesting topic, and I think that we will be able to have a really good journey through this today. But in order to do that, I would suggest and would appreciate if you would turn off your cell phone, your TV, or any other distracting device that you have, simply because you'll learn more. I think you'll enjoy this more, and we can interact a lot more if we're all on the same page. So today's goals are to know who it is that we're dealing with. All right. I know that if your child is ADHD, your spouse, your partner, your colleagues, your students, your clients have ADHD, you may be highly perplexed and irritated at some of the things they do that you find absolutely inexplicable at times, lying being one of them. So we'll address, once we understand what the foundation is behind lying, we'll address why it actually is occurring. And finally, we'll suggest some ways to cope with lying and to try to get that behavior changed as well. I always smile when I see Judge Judy. She is one of my favorite TV personalities. She's brilliant. She, as she calls herself, the truth machine, she genuinely is a truth machine. There is no doubt about it. Her particular method of prosecuting a case and interrogating witnesses brings her to a level beyond the pale, definitely. So she is preternatural, is a good word to describe her. She's above natural in her ability to do that. Unfortunately, all of us here don't have her skills. We don't have that level of experience and skill to pry truth out of our kids or our spouse or our colleagues or partners, and it's very frustrating to us. So just so that we're all on the same page, we need to be clear that on average, children with ADHD are likely to be 3 years behind their peers in brain development. Now, that also affects us in adulthood as well, simply because we are starting at a deficit. And we'll go into this in more detail as we proceed. We believe also that honesty is an important value to teach our children. Now, when we talk about this, that our belief system is such that we value honesty, but then again, we're dealing with people who don't seem to be able to be honest at particular times. We also have to understand then that executive function is weak in children and adults with ADHD. Now, this is like a can of truly bad tasting soup. If you mix all of those ingredients in the can together, you have a problem. And that's why we're here today. Are we overreacting? Do we overreact to the problem? Or honestly, is it something we should be furious about? We have to actually understand what it is we're dealing with and then how we cope with it, how we manage it. I know many of you here know what executive function is, and many of you do not. So I'm going to describe what executive function is in the brain. So executive function actually is, to quote Liam Neeson, a particular set of cognitive skills. We have a particular set of skills, and these are cognitive skills. Now, these cognitive skills form the foundation of executive function. And these include attention, being able to pay attention. That's an executive function. And they're called executive functions because it's like a corporate structure where the executives make all of the primary decisions and organize and control. And when you talk about ADHD, which is part of the subject matter today, ADHD is actually a misnomer. It's the wrong name. It absolutely is just totally the wrong name for what is happening. If we looked at it as an iceberg, at the tip of the iceberg, we have attentional issues. Now, they have plenty of attention. The problem is that unless the stimulus is incredibly interesting to them, they have a difficult time paying attention to it. And so their attention is often diffused, scattered over a wide area. You can think of it sometimes like having 3 or 4 television stations playing in your brain simultaneously all the time. And you start to get a feel for what it is they're experiencing. Now, these are some of the elements to working memory, to executive function, working memory being primary. All right. In this case, the working memory is the ability to manipulate data held in our minds for a little bit, and then try to come up with conclusions based on working with that particular data. That's called working memory. Quite essential to being able to function normally during the day. And Heather asked a question if we could get copies of the slides. We are recording this webinar, so a recording will be issued to you when we are finished. Good question. Emotional regulation is also part of executive function. If your child, student, spouse, partner, so forth, experiences they become highly irritated off of something that's very trivial, if they have overly responsive behavior when we would a reasonable person would not, that's emotion regulation. Mental flexibility is the ability to transition back and forth between tasks. If you have an ADHD child that has a routine, they'll perform well. What happens if you take them outside that routine? Do they have an emotional meltdown? Is it very difficult to put them in transitional spaces? Very frequently you find that it is. Self-monitoring is also something that's deficit. Now remember, I'm talking about children, but this oftentimes, if we do not resolve these issues early on, these follow us into adulthood. Self-monitoring means I'm self-checking. I am monitoring whether I'm doing something, and then I'm able to augment that behavior. Now, ADHD, since the brains are behind in development 3 years, and if they're behind in development, that means that self-checking is behind. And if it follows me into adulthood, I've seen children who and I've talked to their parents, they walk through a dark living room for years, and they will bang their shin on a coffee table. And doing so, they will repeat it the next night and the next night and the next night. They don't have the self-monitoring going on, situational, that provides situational or environmental awareness. They just do it over and over again. And so as a parent, you're quite bewildered at how this could possibly keep happening. It doesn't happen to you. What is the difference? The difference is in executive function. Task initiation, you see that it's very difficult to start homework, and it's very difficult to complete it. If I'm an adult, I may start a project, I may start 50 projects, and I'll finish none of them. Organization and planning, prioritizing, major problems in executive function deficits. If you look at your child's backpack and it looks like it is just a total wreck, I guarantee you go to their school and you'll find their desk is the same. If your partner or spouse has a problem with this, you can go into their desk, you'll see the same thing. They carried it through from childhood. They have difficulty in organization and prioritization. Inhibitory control. What comes out of my mouth without a filter? That's inhibitory control problem. What comes, what if I do something? I try to shove somebody away at the water fountain at school, or I say something or do something to a colleague that just a reasonable person would not do. That is inhibitory control. So you kind of see how executive function really rules our lives and helps us function day to day. We are all born with the ability to learn these executive function skills. But if we start at a deficit in brain development and we're not instructed on these skills, and there are ways to do it. I mean, I specialized in this for the past 30 years. We train not only ADHD students, but people with traumatic brain injury, nuclear operators, NASA pilots, Da Vinci robotic surgeons. Executive function can be trained. That's what we specialize in. And here's a good example of looking at brain development and how executive function slowly forms in a neurotypical child. If you ever are playing with an infant and you put a toy in front of that infant and you take it away, then that early on in that child's life, the child is totally disinterested because it has vanished, right? There is no more toy when you take it out of their sight. But then as they age just a little bit more and their brain develops a little bit more, you'll put the toy in front of them and then place it behind your back. And all of a sudden they're able to follow that toy and understand it still exists, but it's behind your back. So you've seen bits of executive function start to happen in children, and then it's supposed to follow us through to adulthood. It does not happen the same way for every person on the planet, especially if you have ADHD, because that means that executive function is particularly weak in certain areas or particularly deficit in certain areas. So we understand how it works normally, but then there is a difference, definitely a difference in brain function in people with ADHD. So if an ADHD child or adult has difficulties with executive function, these functions are not in their control yet. As a matter of fact, most of the time it's out of their control, right? And if the wiring isn't there, the statement is really salient. If the wiring isn't there, then neurotransmitters aren't there either. That means brain function is a problem. All right. If the wiring isn't there, the neurotransmitters aren't there. So what does this look like? What does this look like in the average day for a person with ADHD? What does this look like? In order to understand that, we're going to walk a mile together in ADHD shoes. Now I'm going to cover ADHD shoes for teens, we'll say above 10 years old. We're going to talk about it in adults, and we're going to talk about it for younger children. So we understand the mechanism that is causing lying. All right. Let's take the walk. Over the age of 10. So let's say school is your job, right? And each day you go to school, your job demands that you plan, organize, right? You organize, complete your tasks, switch seamlessly between your classes, use your working memory flawlessly to understand what's going on in the classroom and learn, and then remain calm, trying to do all of the things your brain is not capable of doing yet. That is a difficult situation. And you can see now that if my brain is not functioning on a good level with or has good executive function, these are weak skills, yet every day my job demands that I do this. You can see where it starts to crush self-esteem after a while. What will I do if I cannot do these things and I'm not equipped to do these things? What would I do? And we'll address this. Would I lie? Let's take a look at it at home. At home, I'm required to clean my room. There's task completion and organization, really, right? Then do my homework. There's planning and organization. Then sweep the kitchen floor, more task switching. Contend with annoying brothers and sisters, and I have to regulate my emotion. Now, am I equipped? Is my brain equipped to do any of this really well? No, it's not. Is this demanded of me? Yes. Do I have any skill sets that allow me some type of compensatory skill to do this? Not really. So what happens? Well, you probably are aware, but here's some of my options. What would I do? Could I pay someone to do it? Do you ever, anyone here, ever note your child trying to pay brother, sister, or a friend to do something for them that they can't do? You raise your hand if you've had that. That's what I thought. Have they ever done as little as possible and say they really did the job, the whole job, but they only did a little tiny part of it? Raise your hand on that one. I always see a lot of that too. How about we bribe an older sister or a younger sister, an older brother, or some sibling to do it? All right. Danielle said that she was guilty of doing that. So did we ever bribe? Do we ever say, hey, I'll give you my dessert. I'll give you my milk money for tomorrow. I'll give you my allowance if you'll do that for me, don't tell. And then finally, would I lie and say I did the job? How many people have seen that? I suppose most all of us here have seen that simply because you're here. That's what I thought. So this is the troubling part. Rather than get crushed for something that I cannot do, I would rather lie to you to tell you that I did it. And in my mind, if I tell you this, to a certain extent, I believe it. And therefore, I'm okay. I'm normal. I'm doing things that you ask me to do. But in fact, it's not true at all. But you can see now, as this progresses, if I am doing this, it is very difficult, a very difficult life. And I want to introduce you possibly to a new vocabulary word. The word is onerous. Many of you may know what this word means, but this is a word that is particularly relevant to today's conversation. Onerous is asking someone to do something, right? A task, duty, or responsibility, involving an amount of effort and difficulty that is oppressively burdensome. It is incredibly difficult. So it is onerous that we ask them to do these things. It really is. We still expect it. Well, there is some expectancy of them to perform somewhat well and not lie to us about it. But I would rather than admit to you that I cannot function well, I will lie, and that will keep my self-esteem from totally bottoming out. That will keep me from getting fully what I feel crushed. Sometimes it does crush. They don't lie sometimes, and they just know that they can't do as well as you want them to. And by the, excuse me, by the time they hit middle school, they say, Mom, I hate school. Dad, I hate school. I'm quitting as soon as I possibly can. Excuse me. And in some cases, they actually will start self-medicating. Anyone here seen that at middle school and higher? They will start self-medicating. Yeah, a lot of us have seen that, to try to help themselves, to figure out a way to do this. And this is problematic in itself. How many people here have experienced one of their children talking to them about hating this school and not wanting to continue in school? Anyone here? Yeah, that's a great number of us as well. So this is what is actually happening in the background. So now we understand exactly what is happening with our teen. But what about adults? What happens? Well, the problems I had with executive function likely remain. I may be successful because I developed some compensatory skill sets going along just as a matter of survival. I developed some compensatory skill sets. But the fact is, a lot of my executive function problems remain. And then I carry on with the lying just as I did when I was young. Now, if I do that, it is still because I am in denial at this point. I understand as an adult I have these problems, but would I rather lie than admit to everyone that I can't do these certain things? They're troubling to me. I don't have an easy time of it. I would rather lie than have everyone think that I'm incompetent or I'm not able, because very likely I'm highly intelligent, but I don't want people to know what's going on. And if I do even tell you what's going on, likely at that point you wouldn't understand it. And so I would rather lie. So they just continue into adulthood. Executive function problems continue, my lying continues, and then it becomes habitual. After a while, I just do it. It's a matter of survival. I just do it. I lie all the time because it saves me from getting hurt. It saves my feelings from getting hurt. And I'm thinking too that it may, if I'm in a relationship, it may keep me from hurting the other person's feelings. But once you're caught and people get to know that you are a habitual liar, then they don't trust you. And then you run into a whole different set of problems. So I think this is quite important to us to understand how this happens, develops in early childhood. We don't have a plan. This remains with me until adulthood, and I still have that problem with lying. Children over or under the age of 10. This is an interesting part of life here. Young children tend to be very egocentric, and they think that the world revolves around them. As a matter of fact, they control much of that world by magical thinking, by thinking that I did this. As a matter of fact, if they see that you're sad, many times they'll come and put their hand on your shoulder or hug you and go, I didn't mean to make you mad, even though they had nothing to do with it. If you're happy, they feel internally that they're in charge of it. They believe in the Easter Bunny, unicorns, and Santa, and they think that stuffed unicorn they got, they can magically enable it to come to life. Now, this is very common. This is neurotypical. This is what we consider reasonable behavior. And it is all in brain development. It is all due to the fact, the way the brain develops over time. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. Children around the age of 3 learn to lie. Up to that point, they typically don't lie. It is very common for them to start telling lies around 3 years of age. Now, much of this research has been known for many, many, many years. And if you're not familiar with an author, a Swiss psychologist, I think initially he was a Swiss biologist or zoologist, but he became a Swiss psychologist. His name was Jean Piaget, Jean Piaget, Jean Piaget. Study this, and the experiments he did with children to understand how they were developing, how their brains developed, how they perceive the world is absolutely phenomenal. You probably can find videos on YouTube if you'd like to read. There's so much on it. But if you have young children, to read this and gain an understanding will enlighten you amazingly on understanding what is happening. So up to the age of 3, they basically don't lie. Did you do that? Yes. But at the age of 3, they learn up to the age of 3, remember, they're very egocentric. Well, they're still egocentric at 3, but they think that you are able to read their mind, because the way that we operate as adults, we present as if I know what's going on in there, and they think you can. But at 3 years of age, they go, Mom and Dad don't know anything about what's going in my mind. They don't know what I'm thinking. Therefore, I can lie, because they don't know if I'm lying. So this, act of lying at that point is an avoidance of danger, right? And I'll give you some examples. It can also avoid punishment, which is danger in itself. But let's look at some examples, right? So magical thinking, I'll talk about just a little bit as well. It's just the fact that they can wish things away, that they can control the way the world is in their mind. And if it is so here, then it is so outside and external to their mind. That is magical thinking. They can wish things away. And this is just a natural process of brain development. So if I ask this first little fellow, did you mark all over that wall? If he's younger than 3, he'll probably say, yeah, I did it. I'm caught, and no problem. And if he's over the age of 3, I don't know who did it. And that is because he's learned to lie. And he knows that if he doesn't lie, you're going to get mad. And I want to avoid you being mad, so I'm lying. Little fellow in the middle, did you eat that chocolate donut I told you not to eat? No, I just picked it up. A cat ate it. Our cat ate it. That's what happened. The cat ate it. The little one, we find her with a lock of hair in her hand and scissors in her hand. Did you cut your hair? No, a fairy flew in the window and the fairy cut it. So we learn to do these things because we learn that Mom and Dad don't have the ability to read my mind anymore. The brain is developing safety outlets. What do we do? What do we do? Well, typically, I hope you're not overreacting, right? And I know that's easy for me to say, because when you have this value honesty, you as a parent or as a spouse or a partner, teacher, clinician, we value honesty because it's what allows us to grow as human beings. Dishonesty does not allow us to grow as human beings. If it does it in the wrong direction. So overreacting does not help. So that bottom bullet point, exercise your executive function. And can anyone tell me which executive function particularly I'm talking about when we confront lying? Patience. Emotional regulation is the best answer here. Emotional regulation. I have to exercise my emotional regulation. Now, let's go back a slide. If I found this right here, and this little fellow had just drawn all over the wall, being able to emotionally regulate would be very, very difficult for me to do. Right? It would be very tough. Although I would have to. If I understand, and I hope everyone does at this point, understand the mechanisms that are not in place, that are running our lives, then I'm hoping that we can, as parents or teachers or in a relationship, whether we're married or not, it affects all of that. And so I'm hoping that we can exert our executive function so that we don't overreact. And this is the super important one. The middle bullet point is super important. You're reacting to someone whose executive function skills have not yet matured. And they could be 60 years old and you're encountering this. And I talk to many couples who are going through this, lying, and they just, the one that is getting lied to is having a very, very difficult time understanding what's going on. So I know this slide has a picture of a father and son, but this could be two adults as well. We have to have a great deal of understanding with limitations set. That means I'm not going to take it, lying down. I'm not going to overreact to it, but I'm not taking it lying down either. So I understand that I have to set limits. In this case, I saw that, I know that you put glue in your sister's hair. And so this is unacceptable. So what I want you to do is turn your cell phone off, turn the TV off, and you'll sit on the sofa for a half an hour. And how much time that you actually give in this situation is related to their age. You'll sit on the sofa for half an hour and watch as we have to cut the glue out of your sister's hair and watch her reaction. She's very upset. And you have to understand that you've done this. So you've put limitations on, and he's also understanding that he's accountable. Now, you may go further than that, but you want to make certain that honesty is a policy here. At first, you did not tell us that you did that. You said someone else did it. Your sister told us the truth. Now we want you from here on out to report the truth. Truth is very important, and you have to set those limitations. Otherwise, you are in for a world of trouble if you do not. A step ahead. Now, what does this mean, being a step ahead? Let's say that I asked my daughter to clean her bedroom. And I go by an hour or 2 hours later, and I see, even though she was up there, the room is still a mess. So I go down and confront her. And I say, hey, I thought I asked you to clean up that room. And what would be the answer out of her mouth? That's right. I did it. Right. Elizabeth said, I did it. I did it. Absolutely. You can yell all you want. She's going to say, I did it. I already did it. I told you I did it. I was up there. I did it. Now, in her mind, did she do that? In her mind, the answer is yes, I did it. I did what you told me to do. But you're setting yourself up for a fight to do that. So it's not good, especially if you're going to exert your executive function now, right? You're going to exert your emotional regulation. Then you don't work yourself into a fight. That is just a position that causes more harm than any good. Do not confront them when you already know that they are lying. Do not get into a fight by saying, I know you didn't do it. And then they're saying, yes, I did do it. You totally don't do that. Instead, you just simply say, hey, I want you to come upstairs with me. Let's go to your bedroom. So then we go to her bedroom. You don't ask her if she cleaned her room. We can see totally that it's in a wreck still. And you simply state, I am not satisfied with this room. I need this room cleaned. And you can cite some specific things. All those toys on the floor have to go back in the toy box. All your bed has to be made. I'm expecting it. As a matter of fact, I'll sit here and watch as you get this done. Now, it will get done, and it did take time out of your day to manage, but we're parents, and we have to accept the fact that we have to be parents at times and manage this. But Never get into the confrontation with them when you already know they're lying. It just goes nowhere, except it makes all the parties involved furious with each other. And you don't want to divide as a family. You would like to have a close relationship. So the relationship here is, all right, now we're going to clean. And it's going to get done now. This is the way we operate. And it's not giving her the chance to lie. So we're not teaching her to lie. I hope everyone understands where we're going with this at this point. I appreciate the comments that are coming in as well. I'll try to get them as we move forward. Restitution is also important. Restitution is the fact that they have to be held, again, it's accountability. I know that you broke your brother's toy, right? You stole it and then you broke it. So you're going to actually have to hand him back the toy, and you're going to have to pay him out of your allowance for the toy that you broke. Now, I don't get into a confrontation with her about the lying. Again, we know that she broke it. That is a fact. Done. You're accountable. This is what happens. You're going to pay him back for it out of your allowance. Now, it makes them accountable, but again, doesn't allow you to clash extremely against them either. You don't, again, step ahead. I don't confront them with a fight regarding, I don't confront them about something that's going to lead us to butt heads. I have seen so many families do that early on, and by the time that child is middle school, they have lost all touch with that child. They live in the same house, but that child is in a world far different than they understand. They do not even understand who that child's friends are, if he even has any. That child would rather lie to you than get into these butting head confrontations. So that is, a parent, just as a parent, good parenting skill, if you can adopt that method and that use of your executive function. Now, in teens, right, one of the things they can do, and what we can do as parents, is to educate them about the challenges they face. Understanding what we now understand about executive function is critical. So if we can educate them about the challenges they face, it will help them. But we don't want to do it in a way that elicits self-pity or excuses. Because if you do that the wrong way, if you present it the wrong way, then what happens is when you ask them to do something, they won't lie to you. They'll just go, Mom, I'm just not capable of doing that. I can't do that. You know that my brain won't allow me to do that. So they'll start making excuses to do it, not to do it. Something that we know that they likely now that they understand there is a problem, they can start on that project. Now, we may have to manage them more, and there's nothing wrong with that, to help them, to assist them to accomplish things. There's nothing wrong with that. But we definitely don't want them to use this as an excuse. And I have seen that. I have seen that a lot as I've worked with parents over the years, where they absolutely, explain, okay, your brain functions like this. You're not a neurotypical, you have ADHD. And so now they go, hey, I haven't had my medication, I can't do that. Or even if they're on their medication, I can't do that. I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. So you want to understand when you do this, you explain the challenges, you want to understand what their capabilities are, because by the time they're teens, we fully know what they are capable of doing. And then we fully know what they aren't. And typically it's in the details when they aren't capable of doing something, starting a homework assignment. So if we start structuring the time that they're to do it, and we are there with them, helping at times, just monitoring that they're on task, then this will get done a lot sooner. I know we hate doing that sometimes as parents because we are so busy. Everyone is so busy. But you have to understand that quality time is really necessary to spend with your child. And this is quality time. And if we do that, we stay in close connection and we understand what their deficits are, but we actually are trying to help them develop some of these skills called compensatory skill sets. We want to give them cognitive skills that are going to help. Now, we have a limited ability to do that as a parent, but we still can try to apply it. And that's what we're getting at in this slide. Some of the things that we can do is to take brain breaks during homework. Right? That means don't try to sit there or make them sit there for an hour, 2 hours without taking a rest. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to do some homework, go out and shoot some basketball hoops with my son, and then come back in and let's get finished. No problem. Let's take a brain break. I bet people here understand brain break and that you need one too, even as a neurotypical. You may need time at, where you're working, you just go, I got to have a brain break. Anyone here identify with that? Hand up if you do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Melora says, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of us here are saying so. All right, so supervise homework more closely. I know that we would prefer that they're just doing it on their own. If you have ADHD, you can see how difficult this actually is. So keep their self-esteem up, supervise, and you don't have to be, a helicopter parent. Just know how much you need to do to get them to finish and give them praise when appropriate and just nudge them. Just good parenting. And it's hard. It is so hard because we are all incredibly busy. But you have to understand your values as well. I value honesty. To achieve that, I have to be this type of parent. So this is very, very important for us to understand. And then finally, help them break their assignments into small pieces that become easy to manage. Now, that's very important. So if they see that they have this thick textbook, 2 or 3 thick textbooks, and those are their assignments, they have to read, answer questions, quote text, that kind of thing, then it looks like there's an elephant that they have to eat all at one time. They're not going to eat the elephant all at one time. Let's break the assignments into 10 minutes worth of work, and then we'll take a break. We'll take a brain break. And we can get back. It's more manageable if you help them do that. That's good parenting as well. And even if we have enough money to do it and we hire a tutor, we have a tutor who understands this and can help break the assignments into smaller pieces and teach me skills that help me kind of organize my work and break it into these pieces. That's very helpful too. So I'll tell you just a little bit, because this is all related to play attention, about how we help learn cognitive skills. This was my whole basis for doing play attention in the first place. As a matter of fact, I developed the genre of neurocognitive training back in the very early 90s. I actually started putting neurotechnology together with cognitive skill training because I found that it was quite effective for ADHD students to learn these cognitive skills, because I knew at that point ADHD, attention deficit, was not really the problem. The problem was giving them the skill sets they need so they could be successful, didn't fight with mom and dad, or as an adult, I could perform swimmingly no matter what. And that was the basis for it. And I created neurotechnology. As a matter of fact, I've run a couple of other neurotechnology companies now, and the headrest, I don't know if you can see this headrest behind me, kind of blends into the blue behind me. There is a headrest behind me that we are working with car manufacturers on right now that will read your brain and tell you when you're too tired to be driving safely and have a high rate of cognitive load. Perhaps you're trying to text and drive, and it will tell you not to do that. Did you know texting and driving is more dangerous than drunk driving? So this is what we're working on now with car manufacturers and neurotech. The neurotech that we have in Play Attention uses an armband. Now, that armband picks up neurosignal. So it looks at your attention. You actually control a series of cognitive skill exercises, just little games that teach you cognitive skills like working memory, spatial memory, short-term memory, finishing tasks. All of these are taught while we're looking, and they're controlled kind of like they are brain enabled. In other words, your brain turns these on and off. We work on everything from increasing attention for longer periods of time, that's attention stamina, visual tracking, task completion, short-term memory, filtering distractions, transfer and generalization, working memory, auditory processing, hand-eye skills, social skills, mental math, spatial memory, and mindfulness. All of these are, as you could see from our previous discussion, all of these are the mental capabilities, the cognitive capabilities and skills that we need to form strong executive function. And I was the pioneer that started this back in the early days, thinking this is good. And NASA was training pilots and astronauts using neurotech. I actually enhanced what they did and received patents for the enhancements, which became neurocognitive training. And because otherwise, how do we teach it? And this is what I was faced with as an educator. If these people are deficit, if ADHD students are deficit, how is it that I can truly teach these skills? Because as you have probably seen and know by now, they will not float into your head by osmosis. If I'm going to obtain them, I have to learn them. So I had to create a comprehensive program that would allow them to learn that. And I used neurotechnology so that they thoroughly learned it. And it made it easier for them because you can see, you can control the computer character by your attention alone. So attention becomes concrete and controllable. That's what I mean by brain enabled. So what cognitive skills does your child, or do you need, or do your clients need to strengthen? If you want to know, we can schedule an assessment with us so you can learn more. We have two really good assessments. They are not of Play Attention. They are actually external assessments. One is called the Focus test, which will give us an idea on these are all norm-based and referenced tests. So within 20 minutes, we'll see what their particular skill set is in attention and how distractible they are to auditory and visual stimulus and how much they recover after a moment of loss of attention, that kind of thing. And that would be one. And then I would also recommend the BRIEF, the BRIEF, which is an index of executive function, so that we can also take a good look at their executive function skill at this point in their life. And that gives us a good basis to understand them far more. So you can start your journey from magical thinking and bring that into reality today. If you want an assessment, you can just type assessment in right now, and someone will contact you via email or your cell number, and they'll tell you how to take the assessment plans. You can also schedule consultation. And then there will be a Play Attention webinar, and that's strictly on Play Attention. It's not on ADHD and Lying. It's on Play Attention. That will be February 22nd. So you'll be able to see what Play Attention is like there. And so I'd like to wrap by thanking everyone for attending. We have a very large audience today, so this is quite a hot topic as well. I think that if there is more that we can do, let us know. I really appreciate it. It's always exciting to be here and to be able to talk. If there's anything else we can do, call the 828-676-2240 number, or if you've received a communication from us, just email back and we'll be happy to help. But it's been a pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Take care.